Hello and welcome back to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sports culture in the UK and the USA. I am your resident Brit, Harry Collins.
And I am your resident American, Adam Jordan. Harry, how you doing today?
I'm really good. I've actually been sick since literally the moment we stopped recording the last podcast. And for like however many weeks that's been, which is why I sound a little bit different. But during that time, we've had just this wonderful nut of sport to enjoy. We invested our nut like the squirrel, and then in the winter we've been able to enjoy our nut. I watched the college football final. I've watched the NFL championship games, so we know who we have for the Super Bowl. There's been the Aussie Tennis Open happened, and we had both of our winners there. American won the women's final, Madison Keys. So yes, sport has been carrying my lifeless, sickly English body. I've looked very pale. It's because I've been sick for weeks. Adam, how are you? How's your nut?
Thanks for asking, Harry. It's great.
You're welcome.
No, yeah. I mean, I've been feeling I've been like feeling all my British feels today. Like, I think one thing it's implicit more than it is explicit in terms of how much we allude to it versus just out and out say it about how much we both like drink in the cultures of our respective countries. Yeah, I mean, like you've got an American jersey on right now. I've been like binging Slow Horses, which I know that you don't watch, but we've talked about this. I just finished it. It's so good. And anyway, I've just been like having all that in my head. I was listening to the BBC like all day today.
Incredible.
Because that's just, I'm like that. And then I'm on my second brew of the day. So I'm literally drinking it.
What are you drinking?
A brew. I'm drinking tea. I'm drinking tea that I might be too far down, but it's got milk in it. You've told me my tea is stronger than yours, so I feel superior in some ways. But
I'm drinking Pepsi.
How about that?
Which is made where?
It's made actually right here in North Carolina, or it was
wow,
created right here in North Carolina. So how about that?
God.
Oh man.
If people thought we do this and we were lying about our obsession with each other's nation, this show wouldn't last more than like 30 seconds.
It's not a bit,
This is so
folks.
authentic.
It's not a bit. But yeah, okay, so to your point, Super Bowl is set. That's obviously the biggest thing. You covered it in your lovely weekend replay, your double weekend replay over on TikTok, and YouTube Shorts. But anyway, yeah. So the Super Bowl is set. The Meteor did not win. Basically, everybody in America wanted, outside of the Philly and KC fan bases, wanted the Bills and the Commanders to win. That didn't happen. But instead, we've got like the two teams that are objectively the best teams over the past, the most dynastic, I guess, teams. Sure. The Eagles aren't really a dynasty, but they're perennial contenders. You've got two great teams in the Super Bowl. So, not unexpected, but here we are again.
I think we're in a really tough moment, and I think all sports fans get to. 4 years ago, everybody wanted Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to do really well. And then suddenly they're too good. And like any other instance, we just want to tear them down. We are in the Premier League, we're looking at like the end of a dynasty. And I've been saying for a while, when the Manchester City dominance ends, we'll miss it. We will think back and be like, oh my God, that was amazing. If the Chiefs get a third successive Super Bowl, that will be historic. We will have all watched history, and yet however many million Americans are rooting against them, I have outwardly been rooting against them on the weekend replays, and yet we'll watch it, and if they fail or if they win, we will get to think back on, oh my God, we've watched such amazing football from the Chiefs. just wish we could have that sort of retrospective appreciation right now.
So
Because
true.
yeah, I don't want them to win.
So true.
Even though they're amazing.
Yeah, exactly. It's so fun, and it's interesting that you bring up the comparison there with City, with Man City, because I've been, people I've been like remarking to my friends on this. I've told them, like, it's amazing how much America loves a winner until they hate it. But it's definitely not just an American thing, but it's something that is part of what I've noticed in America. I mean, it's especially, when you look back at the Patriots dynasty before this, when you look at basically any dynasty in any sport. I mean, the New York Yankees, think about the Dodgers right now. Everybody can't stand the Dodgers because of how much money they spend. So it's really interesting. But one angle, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but one angle that we've, I think that makes a lot of sense to discuss for this show is, it hasn't been discussed recently, but this year it has been at the beginning of this football season. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, again for at least the second time, didn't rule out putting the Super Bowl in London or putting it somewhere internationally other than the United States one day, which is just a crazy thing to think about. But is that a good thing? I don't know. My gut says no, but what's your perspective on that?
Firstly, the idea of sharing specifically American sports internationally is not a new one. In the UK, we get what, 4 NFL games a year. They seem to all be Jacksonville games because we want the Jaguars more than the people of Florida do.
America loves a winner.
Yeah, America loves a winner. We'll take the stragglers. We've had Major League Baseball games. We have the Summer Series here in London as well, and I know American football is also played in like Berlin and other international markets. So the NFL, I think, is treading this path better than other teams and other leagues. Sorry. Do I think there is a bigger appetite for the Super Bowl outside of the US than inside of the US? Absolutely not. I would be completely shocked if this ever happened. I don't know where a market would be strong enough to drag all of the extracurricular commercial elements out of the US. I think maybe there's some fatigue in deciding which city hosts the Super Bowl, because it seems to be, the same 15 cities are candidates. You need a stadium that is so big with so many amenities and capabilities. And yes, there are more around the world. And Wembley would probably be one of them, or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But still, are we gonna host the Super Bowl at, the game kicks off at midnight here, so it still works for you on your Saturday or your Sunday evening? No, it's not going to happen. It's really interesting, and I think Goodall says it to maintain that sort of curiosity in the commercial future of the NFL. Not that it needs it. It's still like, for numbers, it's still one of the biggest leagues, if not the biggest league in terms of revenue in the world. But yeah, I think just to make sure that Goodall is selling something that still has a pulse, which is a funny thing to say in the run up to the Super Bowl. I think it makes sense for him to vocalize that, but I really could never see it unless it was like Canada. Yeah. I couldn't see it. I really couldn't see it coming off. Is that sort of in line with what Americans think? Are people surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about where I am. I think the reason why it's tempting for people to think about it that way, or one of the reasons it's tempting for people to think about it that way, is that the Super Bowl is such a television based event. People gather around their TVs and have big parties, and it's always every year without fail, it's always the most watched television program of the year. So it's not as though people would be missing out as much on the game day experience. Of course, obviously the Super Bowl is going to sell out every year for ticket wise, but um, it would be incredible to go to a Super Bowl for sure. But I think most fans would honestly rather watch it on television than necessarily be there. That's certainly not true for everybody, and there's a lot of people that would kill to go to a Super Bowl, but just broadly,
including us, if anyone wants. To
yeah,
send us
sure, yeah.
tickets.
Anybody wants to throw us some tickets, go for it. But so I think that's where a lot of it comes from. But yeah, to your point, I mean, time zones, and also the other piece of it too that stinks about this is that obviously sports are a business. I know that very well. I work in the business of sports, but not everything can be about chasing growth and chasing extra profit. I mean, at some point, You're also asking players who have dreamed of this moment their entire lives to play the pinnacle of their sport and win, potentially win the championship of their sport thousands of miles from where you are all the time, thousands of miles from home. That's not fun.
That's an issue that some leagues in Europe, some European football leagues are struggling with. Both the Italian and the Spanish FA have moved smaller club competitions to Saudi Arabia, and they're played live as I mentioned in 2 consecutive weekend replays around Christmas. We had El Clasico, Barcelona and Real Madrid, and then a Milanese derby, both played in Saudi Arabia. Milan, if people listening don't know, AC and Inter Milan share a stadium in Milan. It's an incredible stadium, the San Siro. It holds like 85,000 people. It's more than big enough to host a derby between the 2 massive Milanese clubs, and yet this game was played thousands of miles away from northern Italy to appease a nation state that pumps huge amounts of money into that tournament, so that they have the honor of hosting it, so we can just play sport washing. Obviously, that's a slightly different matter, but
sure.
we're looking at prestigious teams in prestigious competitions that are moving already. I think La Liga has plans to play a couple of games in the US even. So yeah, we're all for globalization of sport in the right setting, in the right context, not for sport washing.
Yeah.
So can you imagine if the Super Bowl was played in Riyadh or Qatar? That would be mad.
It's not.
That's obviously never going to happen.
I mean, never say never. It's not
Exactly.
not unfathomable. Yeah, it's interesting to think about, and we were talking about before we started recording that the Premier League it feels like it's inching towards one day putting a non kind of summer based match in an actual counting for the Premier League match in the US one day. So it's upon us, but it's or not necessarily upon us, but it might not be super far off. So but before we wrap up this kind of first segment, I do want to give an update on something that we haven't talked about quite as much as I think we intended to when we set it off. But we did a while back, you'll remember, a few episodes ago, pick a team that both of us are going to follow. And
yes, we did.
It's been I have to say, things are looking up for our dear Ottawa Senators. So Harry,
Yes.
I don't know if you've had a chance to watch much hockey in the middle of your sickness, but would you like an update on where things stand with the Senators as of the end of January?
I don't want to make myself sound any more hipster than I already naturally am. But yesterday I went to a store that you and I went to last time you were in London, in Camden Market, to buy an Ottawa Senators jersey. And at the steep price of £45, I said no. Then I went on eBay and realised £45, real or fake, would have been a very good deal.
Oh, no, Aaron.
And I should have gone back this evening. So yes, I would love to know how the Ottawa Senators are doing, because I'm currently winning a bid for like 65 quid to own a jersey, so I'd really like that to be worthwhile.
You've got to consult me on these things going forward, because
I know. I'm sorry.
I would have. Oh man. Anyway, imagine a jersey for that little. Anyway, so the Senators are right now. They're actually on a little bit of a hot streak. So our lovable losers for the longest time, they have not made the playoffs in getting closer to a decade than half a decade. It's been since 2017.
Wow.
That they made the playoffs. I think only 4 players I read are from that playoff team are actually even still active in the NHL, period. So it's been a while for the Senators. They've had all sorts of ownership issues and just a lot of off-ice problems. But things are looking up right now. They are looking to make the playoffs again, again for the first time since 17 this year. Right now, they are in the 3rd position in the Atlantic Division, which would qualify them automatically for the playoffs. The way that it works is in the 2 divisions in either conference. The top 3 teams get in, and then there's 2 wild card spots from the rest of the conference. So right now, the Senators are hanging on to that 3rd spot in the playoffs, which is exciting. They've had some trouble generating offense really all year. Their defense and their goaltending has been kind of leading the way for them. Their leading scorer is Tim Stützle, who's averaging just under a point per game.
What a guy!
Just awesome, amazing German forward.
What a name!
Oh yeah, Tim Stützle, and just got a buzz cut. Before the last game. They're now on a 2-game win streak. Oh yeah, it's great. Go look at their social to check that out. But the Senators are looking hot right now, so we'll keep a closer eye on it.
I think we picked a perfect team. That sort of sporting despair was exactly the sort of thing I wanted, and we couldn't have picked that without our AI overlords. So,
exactly.
Big thank you again. Wow. The Senators, a team neither of us had ever thought about before. I hadn't even heard of them before. And now I feel this intense connection to them. Okay, Adam, what are we talking about in the meat and bones of this week's episode?
We're actually coming up here in the next month on the NBA All-Star Game, and actually we would be having the NHL All-Star Game as well coming up, but we have the Four Nations Face-Off happening instead, which is the tournament I talked about last week. But anyway, I figured we're getting around that time of year where we have multiple All-Star Games. That's not really a thing in the UK or really many other places in the world, at least at this kind of scale. So I figured, why don't we introduce that concept and go back and forth on it a little bit? What do you say?
Bring it on. Absolutely. Just the opposite of the Ottawa Senators.
Exactly. So an all-star game. So I think the best way to go about this, because it's not something I don't think that a lot of people on your side of the Atlantic think about too much. So I kind of just want to start off with what an all-star game is. I mean, it's
sure.
It's exactly what it sounds like in the name. It is a collection of teams that are the all-stars, that are the best players in a given league. Traditionally, they're split in the U.S. anyway. The teams are split among league lines. So whether that's a Western Conference and an Eastern Conference, or in the case of baseball, an American League and a National League, you're going to have. Go ahead.
Or in the case of Space Jam, human beings versus the aliens.
That's very true. Yeah, it doesn't discriminate on species.
That is about as close as a lot of British people will know what an all-star game is. That's the touchstone, Adam. That's what you're working against.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. I'll factor that into my to the rest of this episode. So we get kind of the best players, usually really in every league except for the NFL. Just drop everything in the middle of the season to play an exhibition game. between these two teams, and you just get to see the best players play the best players. How exciting is that? Sounds like there's no problems with that, right, Harry? Like, who wouldn't want that?
I genuinely love the idea of all-star games. We'll get into a little bit of like why it doesn't happen in the UK. But obviously, with the exception of the NFL, I really cherish the idea of in a heavily democratized system where American sports teams are sort of designed by the league to not necessarily hoard all of the players and to share. Each team, should. I know it doesn't actually work out this way, but each team gets like a high draft pick. So there should be a good spread of stars around the league. I really like the idea that by conference or by area, they all come back together and you can watch them in the same place. In theory, I really love it.
Yeah.
But I think in practice, it ends up being a little bit different.
Yeah, that's fair. And also it'd be interesting based on different sports too. Like I could totally understand, and like you said, we'll get into it. But I'm curious, and I think I know maybe some of the reasons, but I understand why you might not have it for a Premier League or something like that. But
Sure.
maybe for cricket, it could be interesting for some of these domestic cricket leagues. I don't know, or rugby or something like that. But yeah, so how I think some of the basics here. How are the teams picked? Well, it kind of depends. It depends on the league. It depends on the time of the time period that we're talking about, because these things have undergone a lot of changes to format over the years. They're exhibition games. You're kind of free to tweak them however you want. But it's usually some combination of a fan vote, a media vote. So the people, we go back to our college football episode, our favorite people, the writers associated with the individual sport will pick the players, will vote on them, and then coaches, managers, that kind of thing will have a say as well. But there's usually now a fan component. But back to kind of the very roots. How did all this start? Whose idea was this? Well, it started as you would probably suspect with baseball. Baseball being the kind of great American pastime, the number one game of the 20th century. We still love it dearly, but America has seemed to move on from calling it number one.
The world's oldest organized league.
Yep. Well, very true.
The pioneer.
Yeah. So the first All-Star game was the first true All-Star game kind of in our modern iteration was in 1933. And it was started because of money. And you'll find this is a theme throughout most of the All-Star games that we'll touch here.
Lots of money floating around in 1933, if I remember my American history rightly. Wow.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
everyone was flush.
A time of great prosperity where people just didn't know. People didn't know what to do with all the cash they had lying around.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was to do with money. So back in 1933, obviously in the middle of the Great Depression, Major League Baseball or baseball players wanted to come up with a way to boost morale, but also kind of raise some extra money for their players who were struggling. I mean, this was a time, remember, players weren't, back then, professional athletes weren't the multi-millionaires and, the upper echelon financially of society that they are today. I mean, they were average Joes making working class salaries. So during the Great Depression, we wanted to boost morale, wanted to raise some money for players so that they could have a pension when they retire, raise some money for some of the players who might have been struggling financially, some of the families of players who were having a hard time during that time. And it ended up being a rousing success. Like it went so well. I think Babe Ruth hit a home run or two, and it went exactly as the organizers planned. It was everything they wanted and more. It was, the first one was in Comiskey Park in Chicago, the home of the Chicago White Sox, not the Cubs. And that one is, bonus trivia question, home of the Cubs.
Wrigley Field.
Well done. Perfect. You've crushed it, Harry. Just wait till later. So yeah, knocked it out of the park. Exactly. So we had this All-Star game where we raised some money. It went well. It actually went so well that in 1959 we decided to have a second All-Star game to raise even more funds for the for Major League Baseball players' pension funds. And we had two All-Star games a year in the middle of the year
Cool.
for 3 years, from 1959 to 1962. Yeah, it wasn't cool. It was seen as ridiculous as it absolutely was. It was not entertaining to have two. You lose the novelty of it. People are like, why are we, raising more money for this when it didn't make a lot of sense. So baseball, there was that tradition has kind of after 1962, we just had the one All-Star game, and that tradition has been the same pretty much since going through today. I mean, the All-Star game has gone through a lot of different iterations. We'll get into kind of some of the ancillary things on top of it, but it's still continues to this day.
Sure. Having two in a year completely defeats the point.
Yeah.
But having that first one where Babe Ruth read the script,
Yeah,
and hits a home run, that's fundamentally what you want from an All-Star game. All it is. Obviously, it's money, but it's for fans. It's just literally exhibition.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the same thing in other sports too. So when all these other ones started, it was either because they wanted to fund, an emergency fund for players, the pensions for players, or it was just hey, this could be a good way to make some extra money, bring some more notoriety to the league. Same thing happens with the Pro Bowl, which was it went by a different name. That's the one All-Star game that is at the end of the season in the NFL. That one started in 1951. The NBA started in the same year, and the NHL started a few years before that, back in 1947.
Obviously, the common theme is that we are raising money for players. The All-Star game comes out of a point of economic strife. When I think of American leagues today, I do not think about money issues. So why do we think the All-Star game has persevered in modern sports culture in the US?
Yeah, well, I think it's a few things. Some of it is accolades. Like when you're selected as an All-Star, I mean, that's part of your legacy. You look at players cool. Like, some of the greatest players of all time in their respective sports. When they say, okay, you won this many MVP awards, you hit this many home runs, scored this many goals, grabbed this many rebounds in basketball. You also think, how many All-Star games did you make? How many times were you selected as one of the best players in the league that season? So there's a little bit of that. And there's also been a lot of stuff added to it over the years. Pretty much every single All-Star game at this point, and really they have for the past 30, 40 years at this point, have some sort of skills competition. So there's a little bit of extra fan fun to be had there. In Major League Baseball, you have the home run derby every year. Who doesn't love watching home runs? In the NBA, you have the dunk contest and the 3-point contest. The Pro Bowl in the NFL has actually completely shifted to their entire All-Star kind of event at this point is all games. They call it the Pro Bowl games because you're basically playing a bunch of mini games out there. And it's, so there's a lot of that kind of fun to it. But that's also kind of some of the criticisms of it too, and why it feels like every year, regardless of the sport, more and more, you're getting people asking the question, why are we still doing this? People aren't trying. The games don't matter. It's people just going through the motions. It's not as exciting. So I think back to a really good example of kind of the differences between back then and now, and some of this kind of feels a little bit more like back in my day kind of thing if you're an old guy. But there was one of the most legendary baseball players of all time. It's a guy by the name of Pete Rose. he has more hits than anybody ever. He hit more than 4,200 hits in his entire career.
Wow.
One of the best players to ever play. Back in the 1970s, or maybe it was the early, I think it was the 70s, in an all-star game, he was trying to score a run late in the game. That I don't remember if it was the winning run or the tying run, or if it was just giving his team a chance. But as he was rounding third base, he was going full steam for home plate, and the catcher caught the ball. And back then, it was totally within your right to just railroad the catcher. You could just run into him, try to knock the ball loose, and he did. So much so that he injured the catcher a guy by the name of Ray Fosse, and he separated his shoulder. I think had some like chest issues. It was a huge injury, and he never recovered from it for the rest of his career fully. Like he was still played, but this was in an exhibition all-star game that didn't matter. And Pete Rose was known for, playing hard at all times, but, it was still an exhibition game. People aren't doing that anymore. So you don't see that. I contrast that with what you see in today's baseball all-star game, and it is wildly different.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the all-star games that I've watched, I think I've mostly been like NBA all-star games. And sometimes it really feels like one or two players, maybe it's their first, are trying hard.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you'll see players pull up way earlier than they normally would and shoot like a speculative three in the hope of getting, like the highlights reel, right? And eventually, by the end of the All-Star game, it's just a bunch of guys sort of jogging from one end to the other. It barely looks like basketball, but it just happens to be, LeBron and Curry and, all of the best players. But then it feels so disingenuous when they clearly aren't trying their hardest, because unfortunately, that's the whole point of sport.
Yeah,
the sport is ruined when it loses its authenticity. So when there isn't even like the illusion of effort, and I say that's the only one that I've seen. I keep up with the mini games sort of Pro Bowl. It's got big Mario Party energy.
It does.
But yeah, I haven't seen the baseball one, but I can imagine, the players are probably enjoying it. They get to fraternize with like all the other best players in the league. But there's what incentive to, other than the accolade that you mentioned earlier. What incentive is there to go out and enjoy it, and really like play hard?
Well, it's hard to create incentive because you also think about it this way too.
Right.
You got the best players in the league doing it. Those players are probably going to be among the higher played. So it's not like they've tried to dangle cash prizes. Yeah, it's nice to have some extra change, but when you're making multi-millions of dollars every year, having an extra million split between your team isn't exactly, it's not exactly the most enticing thing at that point. So it's hard to create those incentives. Plus, one other thing that I will add is this is a mid-season break too. Like for Major League Baseball.
That's the crazy thing.
Yeah. For Major League Baseball, you basically, and really for all the sports, you basically get a week or just less than a week off. You're on the road all the time. You don't get to spend a lot of time with your family during the season. This is a time where a lot of players would rather be doing other things.
Not getting picked must be a bit of a blessing for some like smaller players.
Yeah.
Because hey, you get to watch the All-Star game, I guess. Does it remain? Do All-Star games remain as entertaining to fans? Is there still an appetite for them? Because obviously we're spending a lot of money on them. Players know that they are needed more than they need the game.
Well, not a ton because of what you're talking about. Like these especially it's most obvious in the NBA, you're not seeing these players going out there and trying very hard. I mean, look at the scores of the All-Star games every year. And to be fair, it's it's been like this pretty much forever with the NBA because nobody wants to play super hard and injure somebody, injure somebody else in the league because that's no fun and that ruins the rest of the season. So that's understandable, but the scoring in those games is like you'll have teams approach 200 points in a game in the NBA. You look at the NHL. I think it was 2 years ago. There was in their skills competition, there was a player, a terrific Russian player by the name of Nikita Kucherov, who's one of the top players in the league and has been for several years now. He was getting booed off the ice during the skills competition because it was so clear that he was not trying to like even do the competition part right. Like it's fans, I think, more and more are just finding it more of to be more of a joke. So they try to find different ways to get these players and to create interest. You'll see in the NBA and the NHL, they've done models recently where two of the All-Stars, instead of splitting it by conference, they'll basically do like playground rules where you have two players and you each pick players for your team and you kind of build your own all-star team in that way.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit of intrigue that way. Major League Baseball, the way that they tried to create some more, desire for the players to actually try in the game for more than a decade, from 2003 to 2016, home field advantage in the World Series was based on whichever team won the All-Star game.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Absolutely tear up the real league based on this silly like game that we play.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, I think for a little bit it was, an interesting thing, but after a while you started to see some incredibly dominant teams have to start the World Series on the road, and that went away very quickly.
Now the only other time that I think as an English sports fan, specifically a football fan, a soccer fan, that I've seen all-star games is when the MLS do them.
Yes.
This is a wonderful, the MLS jersey. If people are listening, I'm wearing Beckham's LA Galaxy shirt. I think the MLS do a lot of things. I adore the MLS, and I think they do a lot of things really well. I do not think the All-Star Game is one that highlights the league in quite the light that they hope it does. The MLS All-Star Game is typically a little bit of half and half, like you mentioned. We get like a skill-based game, or different, like passing and shooting games. There's always like a goalie versus goalie game that seems really fun.
Yeah.
And then there is a full match. I remember the most recent one I remember was like the MLS All-Stars versus Europe in air quotes, and it was in 2023 the All-Stars played Arsenal. Mm-hmm. And I remember loads of videos floating around of like the skill games that were played on the first day, and the MLS All-Stars, who typically have a couple of really big names, former world-class players from Europe and a couple of like young up-and-comers from the US, playing in these mini games where they're absolutely spanking the Arsenal players. There's this header and volley game that Kai Havertz was doing really poorly for Arsenal. And then, of course, the following day, Arsenal spanked them 5-0. Now, what you've done is you've taken the very best of the MLS and you've put them in a game against, a pretty good, high-quality European team. And whether or not it's because it's also part of it's during the MLS season. This is happening in August, and the MLS season still has 2 months to go. But you're playing them against high European quality, and they're getting pushed around a little bit. So I don't think it quite. The most recent, I had to look it up. The most recent game was against the Liga MX All-Stars, which is, of course, the Mexican league that the MLS is always duking it out with. And they lost that as well, 4-1. So I really love it in principle, but I just think it maybe, especially in the MLS, maybe just keep it on your side for a little bit longer. Let it bake a little bit longer. Let the league get there.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought this up, because I was gonna say, the MLS All-Star Game is certainly unique in that it's not kind of an intra-league game.
And it should be celebrated,
right?
For sure.
And it's really interesting. And actually, one of my favorite part about it is I think the MLS skills competition is one of the more fun ones in sports.
Yeah.
And I the reason that I say that, it's not because there's something, some secret sauce, something inherent that they do that's amazing. I just think it's cool because you don't really get to see soccer players on that kind of stage get to do that kind of thing. I mean, certainly there's a million people on YouTube and all over social media that you can see doing incredible things with a soccer ball on their foot. But getting to see like all of the best players come together and do that, it's really cool in like a competition format. I love that. But then you go out and you ask them to basically do the equivalent of playing a one-off international match where you're not ever, there's no system, there's nothing. These players
you don't know your teammates,
right? Exactly, against a squad of a squad of players that, even if they're in the off season, know each other, like you said.
Yeah.
So it just
or they're they are they're the last couple of teams that they've played internationally: Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Juventus, Real Madrid.
Yeah.
All of those teams should be in the top 2 or 3 in their country.
Yeah.
It is a real spectacle, but again, as you said, the All-Star team don't really know each other well enough to sort of gel together. I think it would still be interesting if you had the MLS All-Stars play conferences and then ship over like a different All-Star team. From a European league.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
That would be interesting.
However, then that sort of brings us on to All-Star games don't really exist.
Yeah, okay.
In Europe.
So let me get ahead of you real quick, because it feels, as we've been talking through this, I'm realizing, and as I was kind of writing things out for this episode, I've been realizing that All-Star games in general, just there's something about it that just feels very American compared to really anything else in the world. Like from like a sports culture thing. I mean, obviously, like the sports that we play are often very different. The way that we celebrate them, the way that we cheer on our teams is different in a lot of ways. But like, just the existence of an All-Star game feels, like I said, very, very American. And I can't quite put my finger on it as to why, other than it just kind of seems like, oh, we get the biggest and the best all together and we just shove it in your face. But yeah, so this is not a thing in Europe. It's certainly not a thing in the UK, really, with any sport that I could find. So why is that?
I've had to think about like when we distill it, what do All-Star games really do now, and do we have anything do we have anything in the UK or Europe that mimics that? And ultimately, we're still talking about the All-Star game being a financial thing, and it is the presentation of the product in what should be its sort of most highest value form, right? We have all of the stars together, and that draws attention, that draws eyeballs, that draws spectators. We don't have that necessarily baked into our organized leagues. There is not a Premier League All-Star team.
Sure.
Now, recently, until very recently, there wasn't a Premier League Hall of Fame. And we're watching a period of Americanification to the Premier League. And I think eventually maybe we could land on something like a North versus West All-Star game. I would love that. I think that would be really interesting. I actually, a couple of weeks ago when we first started talking about this, I made some of my best friends write out who would be on their roster for, like, you know, if we cut off the North and South, you know, around Birmingham, who would make like the Manchester and Liverpool team, and who would make like the London team. And it's really interesting.
Or hear me out, if I may give you some PTSD. What if you did it east and west of Sheffield?
Oh, no. If anyone wants to know what Premier League football teams are east or west of Sheffield, go back and listen to like the first 2 episodes for Sport Math, where Adam carved out my soul. Anyway, so if we're presenting this game as like the ultimate value package, where you see all of the stars, and you watch them play some sort of disingenuous football, then yes, we have some elements that are similar to that. Okay. They are not branded as all-star games. Number one, we have friendlies. And I'm speaking very much about soccer to begin with. Then we'll talk a little bit about rugby, and then some other sports. But in football, in soccer, we have friendlies, preseason friendlies. We typically see teams play other teams. That's the most boring version, but typically you will get, like, you know, Man City playing other big European competition outside of actual leagues and cup settings, just in friendly games. Yeah. These are typically played in the United States at the moment, or in nations where you're trying to build audiences. Brighton, for instance, we have a Japanese player who brings us an enormous audience in Japan. So we went and played a preseason friendly or 2 in Japan. But we're not adding stars, so let's ignore friendlies. Testimonials. I'm sure this must be a thing in the US. It's such an American thing. The testimonial is a match played for an outgoing legend of a club. They are wonderful. And typically, I know Liverpool have had some really good ones. When a player retires, and they are like a club legend, I'm talking like a Steven Gerrard for Liverpool. I'm talking a Lewis Dunk for Brighton. I'm talking Ryan Giggs or Paul Scholes for Manchester United. These players will play a testimonial, and you will stack the testimonial with other retired players. So it's wonderful. I remember probably 5 years ago now, maybe before COVID, there was a all-time Manchester United team versus an all-time like Bayern Munich team.
Oh, wow.
And you are watching players from your youth. David Beckham laced up a pair of Adidas Predators. He looked incredible in his mid-40s, like striding up and down the right wing. But in that team, there were other Manchester United legends. I think like Berbatov and Rooney played. So there, you know, the all-star package, we are smushing stars into a team. And then, you know, you sell tickets for the testimonial. It will be held in one player's honor. And then I think typically the proceeds from that game go to like a charity or to the club community fund. Then to take that sort of idea of the All-Star game and sort of tear it to pieces, we have Soccer Aid. Do you know what Soccer Aid is?
Is it anything like Live Aid?
Yeah, kind of. Soccer Aid is an annual football match played by celebrities
Nice.
in England. It is England versus like the world. The world in very loose air quotes there. Recently, it's sort of been ruined because we play too many former players. But I remember like a decade ago, Woody Harrelson, the movie star, scored the winning penalty, which he did not know how to take. He did not know what a penalty was. I'm pretty sure like an English comedian explained the idea of a penalty to him as he was walking towards the penalty spot. But yeah, that's always a game played for charity amongst like celebrities. Robbie Williams, who is a huge pop star here that has absolutely no presence in the US because nobody watched his film about the bloody monkey. Gordon Ramsay, you're aware the celebrity chef? Yeah, all of these people playing in a silly football match, and people love it because you're like, oh, there's that guy from One Direction. He's quite good at football, and he's just passed it to that northern comedian who's not very good at football. And they're all playing at Old Trafford. It's really good. It's an all-star game.
Yeah.
None of them are good at football, and it's, everyone, ironically, are trying their hardest.
Yeah.
But they're all very bad at it. And then finally, to flip it on the other side, we have the Lions. We have the British and Irish Lions, which are a rugby team formed of players from England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland who will go on tour. Now, every 4 years, there is a Lions tour. I think we've got one this year after the Six Nations, which starts in like a week. I'm very excited. Yeah. The Lions go on tour to a Southern Hemisphere nation, South Africa, New Zealand, or Australia, and they play that nation a couple of times, basically in like a best of three.
Cool.
But that team will be made up of like the best players from Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales.
So it's basically,
and that typically happens.
It's basically barnstorming. It kind of sounds like.
Yeah, it kind of is. It typically happens right at the end of the rugby season. So these players are a little bit worn out, but they're not worried about getting injured, and then they go off to the Southern Hemisphere. Have 3 weeks of moving around, and it's sort of good for building, for securing that relationship because rugby is very hemispherical. We discussed all of that last week.
It also probably can't hurt because so Six Nations is starting, and then you said they do it like after Six Nations.
Yes, yeah.
It's also probably a nice little weather shift because you shift seasons too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because the Six Nations is played in February and March, which are two of the wettest months. So then they get to finish off by going down and having like the tail end of the summer in Australia or New Zealand or something. I'm sure they all love it. But yeah, so that is like the stars of a tournament, basically, who then go down and play. Unfortunately, they never play in the Northern Hemisphere. So they always go and play basically abroad on tour. So yeah, we don't get to enjoy them like you do All-Star games in the US. But those were the sort of the three variations of the All-Star game as we know and love them in Europe. Just not quite the same breed of the All-Star game as it currently exists in America.
Yeah, that's interesting. You wonder if that'll ever, like you said, as things Americanize, if that'll ever change. And yeah, I think the way that the calendar works, because obviously you've got so many competitions happening at the same time. You've got domestic cups, you've got international competitions. It would probably be pretty hard. And as we have talked about, players are playing too much as is. It'd probably be pretty hard to justify, and it's not like it would be the best game.
I think you've pointed to something that I really meant to mention. Another reason that we don't need All-Star games is because we have international tournaments that typically group the best players in the world and pit them against each other in quite an organic, very competitive manner.
Yeah.
And typically the final of any international tournament will have like the best players in the world.
That makes a ton of sense. And we don't have that. Everybody all the best players are in the same league.
Precisely.
Or in the same
Which is why the four nations, is it?
The Four Nations face off, hockey.
That's going to be really interesting. I saw our boy Sidney Crosby was named the Canada of the captain of Canada. that is interesting. We're going to watch four nations sort of duke it out. The final will have all-star players, and in a game that they really care about.
I think that'll be the Four Nations will be really interesting. It will be. People will not miss the All-Star game. People will be thrilled that this is happening. I think they would be thrilled if this happened instead of the All-Star game every year, to be completely honest.
Yeah, do it.
That's a great point. It basically functions as a de facto All-Star game. Yeah, look at that.
Except fans and players care a lot more.
Yeah, exactly, because everybody loves playing for their country. That's awesome. Wow, look at us coming to some great conclusions here.
We did it.
Yeah, how about that? Well, anything else
right.
before that you want to? Any other questions or anything? Any thoughts on All-Star games before I absolutely take you to the butchers on Sport Math?
No. The All-Star game still is a wonderful idea in principle, but I think we need to find a new way of making it interesting.
Yeah, it's ripe for innovation. Maybe we'll.
Yeah, we'll do it.
We'll
Hey,
figure it
don't
out.
worry. Good old, we'll do it. You leave it to us,
there
King.
you go. There you go. Perfect.
It's all right.
Perfect.
We'll
All right.
take $5 million each.
Incredible.
All right. Okay, come on.
I
Adam.
also want to see sometime. I want to see yours and your friends like teams that you made.
Mine was very good. Sean Soley was unhinged.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I want to see those sometime.
I'll find them.
All right. So as I alluded to just now, it is time for me to enact a little bit of revenge on Sport Math. I could have been meaner. I'll be honest. I think I actually have faith in you to do well on this. I really actually don't think that this is terrible. It'll be tough, but I think it's more of a test than truly revenge.
Well, I want to thank you for your mercy. I also want to say, obviously, this is episode 9 of Athlantic. We're thrilled to get to 9.
Yeah.
I think we should codify. I think we should work out a way of actually making Sport Math competitive.
Yeah.
Come 10 onwards.
Yeah,
We'll have, like,
we
a
got to
little
figure that
ranking
out
or something.
Yeah, for sure. 'Cause-
But hit me with it.
right.
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. And also,
I'm just going to embrace this.
you're welcome for having mercy. That doesn't mean I'm always going to have mercy.
Thank you.
Okay, so your task for Sport Math, it's going to basically be the same format that you gave me last time.
Sure.
So it's going to be a ranking of some final numbers. You have to put them in order is your task. So I want to give the first number is I want you to give me the number of top 4 men's clubs in London. In soccer, obviously. So Premier League, Championship, League One, and League Two. The number of top 4 men's clubs in London. Okay. Your second number is the number of Michael Jordan's NBA MVP awards.
Okay.
Plus the number of Champions League titles for AC Milan.
Ooh, all right.
Your final number is the total number of women's soccer national championships for the University of North Carolina.
Ooh, okay. Women's soccer for UNC. Okay. All right. Can I get a little clarification on the first one?
Yes.
So top 4 in their respective leagues, but we're counting all of the leagues.
Sorry, I don't mean top 4 like in the standings. I mean the top 4 leagues. I probably worded that poorly. The top 4 leagues at the top of the pyramid.
Right. Okay.
So I want
Okay.
all the clubs in the Championship, Premier League, League One, and League Two. I don't know why I put them in that order.
Okay.
But yeah.
Great. I think about that frequently. I will need a ruling on one club.
Okay.
But I will quickly spank through that one. So obviously we've got Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, Brentford, West Ham, Millwall, Palace, AFC, see Wimbledon. God, this is going to make very good content. Sutton is a question mark. They definitely were very recently, so let's pop them in there. Who else am I forgetting? The team that I'm on the fence about is Watford. I don't know if you're going to count that. I wouldn't count that, but obviously they are often bunched in. We've definitely got a club that I interviewed for a job with quite recently, Leighton Orient.
Hire him.
Thank you. You should have. You missed your moment. I've seen the role relisted on the websites. Okay, so Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs. There's Fulham. I forgot immediately.
That's fair.
Bless them. I adore Fulham. We've got Palace, Millwall. There must be the championship team in there. But how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've always thought there are 14. About 13 or 14. So let's assume that I've missed a couple. Okay, the second one, remind me, was the number of MVPs Michael Jordan had.
Yep. Plus
AC Milan's UCL titles.
Correct.
So AC Milan have either 5, 6, or 7. They haven't won one in a while.
You do have to
They
pick
won
one of the
2 in
numbers.
Yes, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, I can't Schrodinger's dog this. There's Schrodinger's
Schrodinger's
cat as
dog?
well. I got the mammal wrong. Let's say, I think they got 7. MJ, I'm sure, got like a surprisingly low number. I think MJ's definitely got single digits. I looked this up recently. Somebody guessed my mystery athlete for the weekend replays. It was Larry Bird, and I spent a lot of time on his Wikipedia page, and I realized even the best players are only getting MVPs infrequently. So I don't know this, but I think MJ is got to be around like the 5 mark, and I think AC Milan have 7 UCL titles. So we'll put that as 12. Which makes sense because it's very similar to the other number.
Sure.
The women's soccer for UNC, I think, will be the biggest number. I think they've won more than. I think UNC women have won almost 50% of all titles ever up for grabs. There was a point where nobody else could touch us. Then I say us.
Yeah,
nobody knows.
No, you can't.
We both went to UNC.
Yes.
There was a while where nobody touched us, and then very recently we haven't won for a while. And then, did we win this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so we won this year. I think we won and took it back to 50%. I did a weekend replay on this. I think they've won like 20. Oh, it's close too. I really tried to watch your face there, and you gave nothing away, you devilish dog. Okay, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I don't want to draw this out.
All right.
I think the lowest number is Michael Jordan MVPs and AC Milan titles, and I think that is 12.
Okay.
Then I think it will be the number of top 4 league. Oh my god, I forgot Charlton. Top 4 league teams in London. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And I'm still confident I'm missing one. So I'm going to say there are 14. Oh god, if we're counting like Barnet, that would be 14. So yeah. And then I think the highest number is UNC women's soccer titles, which is higher than 14. So UNC women, London clubs, and AC Milan time plus MJ.
All right. I am.
Lock it in. Final answer.
So you're saying the middle number is 14? Is that what you said?
You
just locked it in. You can't now. I'm just asking what you said.
Yeah. I said I said the middle number is 14.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right.
Okay. I am incredibly proud of you. You've done yourself very well. The first one you got spot on. MJ had 5 MVPs, and Milan have 7 UCL titles. So spot on there. You've also got the order spot on. You have crushed it.
Yes!
You have crushed it. This is a W. This is a W in my book.
Wow.
The number of top 4 men's clubs in London. And this is, I could also have this wrong. I'm pretty sure I don't. But I have 13. I do not count Watford. Here is who I list. We can cross-reference and see if you disagree.
Sure.
Okay. Premier League, I have Arsenal, Brentford, Chelsea, Palace, Fulham, Tottenham, and West Ham. In the Championship, I have Millwall, and then you forgot one of the only teams that I've seen, QPR.
Oh, QPR. Damn.
League One, you're spot on with Charlton and Leyton Orient.
Yep.
And then League Two, AFC Wimbledon, and you missed Bromley.
Bromley, for the first time in their history, are in the... Yeah, I should have known that. They've never... I don't think they've ever been in the football, the top 4 before, and I should have known that.
There you go.
So Barnet and Sutton were no's, but Bromley and QPR were in.
Yep.
Okay, that is fine. So we landed on 13?
Yep, 13. So 12, 13.
That's pretty amazing.
And then the number of UNC Women's Soccer National Championships. And this is actually interesting because that doesn't mean the number of NCAA championships. So again, you were right on the order. You were a little low. The number of total national championships that they have, which was the number I was looking for, is Michael Jordan's 23 or David Beckham's 23.
Wow. That's huge.
Yeah, 23.
That's dominance.
They won they won 22 NCAA tournaments. They also won a tournament basically before the NCAA had women's sports. They were it was an association called the AIAW, but it's the that is the national championship. I forget what word I'm looking for here is, but that was the governing body that awarded the national championship. So 23 national. Anyway, all this to say, you crushed it. I'm very proud of you.
I did crush that. I'm so happy. This has been the best sport math I've ever done. Yeah. We are going to clip this. I'm going to put this on YouTube. I'm going to send this to my dad.
You should.
I think I knew I was coming in low on the UNC women's football. But I knew that the NCAA titles is like 45 or 50% of all of the ones they've ever done. So I knew that was going to be high. I absolutely love the London teams question. But AC Milan and Michael Jordan both getting that on the nose. I'm very
pretty
proud.
Darn good.
This has been the best thing I've done in 2025.
I'm very happy.
This is genuinely, that's the greatest thing I've done this year.
You said before you started recording that you felt like yesterday, which happened to be Lunar New Year, is your new year. So this is a great way to kick it off. But yeah, so Carolina has won 22 NCAA titles, again 23 total. There have been 43 total.
Oh, so over 50%.
Yeah.
Wow,
it's pretty incredible.
That's dynastic. We should we've been talking a long time about doing like a mini series within Athlantic talking about different dynasties.
Oh yeah.
And that's got to be on the list of absolutely most dominant teams in their respective sports.
No question.
I have had such a good time talking about the All-Star game, and then I put in an All-Star sport math performance. Adam, this has been a fantastic episode. And I really cannot wait to hit Athlantic episode 10.
Woo!
That's double digits, baby.
That is. Yeah, record that in your sport math. Yeah, I am very excited too. This has been a lovely time. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode. Wherever you're watching it, leave a rating, review. Leave us a comment. We'd love to get in touch. Follow us on YouTube or subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Spotify. Harry's absolutely grinding out the weekend replays. I'm trying to get some of the short form content in there too. I'm gonna try to clip out some more elements as I'm editing these of the show itself.
We really survived that TikTok ban.
Yeah.
That came and went about 18 hours. Don't want to talk about why, but yes, we are still, you can still find us on the YouTube Shorts and TikTok and of course Spotify. We haven't discussed this, I'm going to completely pirate this. If anybody has an idea for a sport math question, absolutely leave it in the comments. I'll make sure that only one of us vets the comments before the next episode, and we'll see if we'll just keep an eye out, and we'll happily take suggestions, and we can watch somebody absolutely brutalize both of us. But yeah, Adam, what a great episode! I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you very much. Until we see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.